Captain Peter Kutsi, South Korea, and this is my briefing room. We have now completed our pre-flight procedures, both the captain and the first officer, and the captain called for the pre-flight checklist. It was accomplished and finished, and now the crew members are going to go ahead and do the performance with the OPT. This is one example of an OPT that we're looking at here, and your particular OPT may look a little different. In any case, the captain initiates the performance. So once he asks the first officer ready for the performance, so phase one, first officer agrees, and the captain will read the fin number off of the flight plan. They will locate that fin number on the OPT, and then once they do, they'll read it to each other, initiated by the captain and confirmed by the first officer when reading it. And then the captain will start airport OOMS, and we type it in as we see here on the top, and the first officer OOMS and type it in. Runway 08, that really should be runway 08 left, and the first officer runway 08 left, and so on. Intersection, all, condition dry, dry. The next three items are not read. They are done privately. That is the surface wind, the outside air temperature, and the altimeter, to ensure that both pilots heard correctly in what the H's actual weather was. Then the captain will read the RTG optimum and assume temperature, flaps 5, and the air conditioning automatic, anti-ice off, and a balanced field length. Now this particular operator uses this OPT for their operation. So the OPT does afford different settings, such as maximum, and we'll let's say we'll use that for today. That's what their SOP stated. And then once that is complete, then the pilots privately load the surface wind, direction and speed, outside air temperature 32 degrees, Muscat today, and the Q&A 2013. They don't discuss it. Now they're going to wait for the load sheet and final figures delivered to them either through data link or through paper or through both. In the meantime, if they haven't received those figures, it would be wise to go through with the taxi and takeoff procedure, the taxi and takeoff briefing, or get your ATC clearance. Remember, you've only got 30 minutes from the time you get on the flight deck till you actually can be ready for pushback. So all of these procedures that I've been doing have been helping new pilots learn, and I've spent much longer, of course, discussing, adding comments. But in actual fact, from the time you board the airplane till you are ready for pushback, it shouldn't really be more than 30 minutes, and when you're practicing your procedures, you can practice them in order to get them done at that rate. That includes this procedure that we're doing now. All right, so we've done phase one of the operational performance, and we can actually say that we have now received the final figures, so we will do the final phase of the OPT. So the captain receives the load sheet, confirms the boarding of the baggage, cargo, all the requirements on the load sheet, and signs as having accepted that. And once the load agent has left and they've received their final figures over the data link, or in any case, whatever way you receive your final figures, the captain will begin the final process of the performance. He will read the actual takeoff weight, and as he reads it, he will type it into his OPT, 55,906 kilos. First officer will repeat it and type in 55,906 in his OPT. Now, when I say his, I mean his or her, and I'm really meaning both genders. So, but please accept the fact that when I refer to people as he, that I do mean both. Thank you for that. The MAC TOW 22.8. So those are the two figures that the captain is reading from the load sheet, and both the captain and the first officer entered them in their respective OPTs, and providing they have selected or entered the wind and temperature and Q&H privately, they will execute the respective OPTs, or their OPTs will generate the final figures, whatever software your company has received from Boeing. So in this case, the software has computed the flaps 5 and a runway intersection of 08. So the and the takeoff weight of 55,906. Acceleration height of 1,048. That needs to be 1,025 for Muscat, because Muscat is 25 feet above sea level. So let's assume that's 1,025 feet MSL, and the takeoff 2 at 96.5, trim at 5.3, CG is 22.8 as we entered it, and the selected temperature, because we've decided to use assumed thrust, is 55 degrees, and the speeds of V1, VR, V2, 125, 127, 139, and VREF 30, 137. So these figures, follow your company SOPs, and let's say that your company have got an area on the flight plan where the first officer would then enter all of this data on the flight plan, and then the reference from that point onwards will be from the first officer's flight plan copied data compared to the captain's OPT data. And then once the first officer has copied it, we'll ask the captain if he's ready for readback. And once the captain agrees, the first officer will read back all the data that he or she copied from their respective OPT onto the flight plan. So we're reading from the flight plan all this information you see on the screen, and one by one, the captain cross-checking against his or her OPT to ensure that the data is the same. If the data is the same, it means that both pilots copied the same ages. And that is actually a safety feature in ensuring that you did not make a mistake in the performance. And once that is done, then the captain will actually ask the first officer to enter the actual zero fuel weight, or I should say the actual takeoff weight, correction, the actual zero fuel weight from the load data into the FMC. All right, so let's go right into the airplane now. Let's do that. So we're going to take a little time to do this, so just bear with me while I zoom in and get a good picture here. So the first officer will have this page up, and the same page, we're going to look at it on the captain's side. So zero fuel weight from the, in red by the captain, the first officer, from the load sheet is 114,306. We're working in pounds. It so happens And if you notice, the FMC actually rounds it off to 114.3. So you wouldn't execute. You'd actually look up the top number, which is really your weight at this particular time. So we're talking pounds now for this example, because the FMC, the software is in pounds. What we had done was in kilos. I converted it by multiplying by 2.205. In any case, the procedure now is not to execute. The procedure now is to look at that weight, which we are, and at 123,600. And that's your current weight, not your takeoff weight. So go to the flight plan, which we're looking at now, and looking at the taxi fuel, which is 400 pounds. Deduct 400 pounds from that to 123,200. That should be your takeoff weight on the load sheet, plus or minus the tolerance that your company have set up for your operation. So 123,200, you look at the load sheet, the 123,273. Well, you're within 73 pounds. So after the captain looks at the first officer and says, "Are you happy with that?" She says, "I'm happy with that." He says to her, "Execute." She executes. Now what we have here are the solid figures. Now, what happens now is the first officer will go ahead and continue filling in all the performance data from the flight plan. The flight plan numbers that he copied. So the assumed temperature was 55, that in, 22K, TO2, and the climb selected to climb Q automatically. Then to the takeoff page, and page 2, and the surface wind is 0.60 degrees at 4 knots. For this flight today, and you enter that. The runway slope off of your OPT, I don't have it here. And you really should put it in, because it could make a difference of 1 knot or whatever. And we're going to be NAGP number 2, so that's an acceleration of 3,000 feet above field elevation. And climb thrust to be selected at 1,500 feet above field elevation. And we'll say that your engine out policy is 800 feet is when you would actually start cleaning up with an engine out. So that's done in page 2 first, and then back to page 1 and fill in the flaps off the first officer's flight plan, of course. And the CAG was, let's go back and have a look at that. CAG was 22.8, and the trim at 5.3, or 22.8. And you'd actually get, there's your 5.3. Now at this point you'd stop. First officer would stop and record that on the flight plan. Because remember, the flight plan is the only official document once you finish with the OPT. Someday all the information from the OPT will be uploaded into the cloud by a data link or whatever and off to the company. But right now everything is done on paper on the flight deck. And then harden the speeds. And we have a V2 of 134. All right, so now at that point, the first officer would continue and go to the approach page and confirm that the VREF 30 is 137. Now we'll have a look at that, and VREF 30, here it is, 137. So it confirms. All that checks out. All right, so back. Now to the climb page, and set 250 knots out of 10,025 feet. So it's 250 knots and 10,000 feet above airport elevation. Now at that point, the captain will go up to the MCP, and we'll make sure he's on the takeoff page, because he will be the pilot flying, and he's going to set the ref with should say a V2 speed of 134. So he would go up to the MCP, and the first officer would be following him too to make sure everything is done correctly. And now, want to make sure we've got that correct. B2 is a 139er. All right. Left to right, the auto throttle arm, 139 on the speed. VNAV arm, and the initial heading is already set. LNAV is armed, and the initial altitude, we're going to get it later, so I've offset something that's a little different just as a reminder. And we'll get that later when we get the clearance from ATC. But so far, we've got that done. Performance is complete. That's one way to do it, and I think it's an excellent way, and many airlines employ exactly what you see. So I'm going to stop this video. I'm trying to keep the videos down to a minimum amount and breaking them down into all different sections. So this is the performance part of this particular flight is complete. The next video will be receiving the ATC clearance and then going ahead and doing the taxi, before taxi, and takeoff briefing. All that's done before the engine starts. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next.